Join us for our upcoming fundraiser, A Feast for the Senses, at Ardmore Music Hall on September 29th to help HRN expand our table and provide even more resources to the next generation of food storytellers. This is going to be an unforgettable night of flavors, crafted by Best of Philly chefs Randy Rucker and Eli Collins, with sounds curated by Philly-based Spaga, featuring Aaron Magner, and conversations inspired by Delicious City Philly host Eli Kulp. You can find tickets at heritageradionetwork.org/feast. And if you can't make it to our fundraiser, please consider donating to support our education programs at heritageradionetwork.org/donate.
I'm Lou Bank.
And I'm Greg Benson.
And this is an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup, the critically acclaimed award-winning syrup that helps gringo bartenders better make margaritas, Negronis,
Lou, hold up. Wait,
old
are you just...
fashions?
This is how you start your podcast.
What?
It's not an ad for Ancestral Agave Syrup.
Well, of course it is. I'm just cutting costs by not paying writers to make something new. I'm just using an old script.
You pay writers?
Is that some kind of jab?
No, I'm just saying that...
What are you saying?
Well, look, we've got this amazing syrup that's made in an ancestral manner, cooked down from the sap of the agave, harvested the way these families would to make pulque. It's a quality product. It deserves a quality presentation.
Yeah, okay, hang on. Ancestral agave syrup is made by real families following traditional methods. Unlike the industrial Blue Weber syrup you get everywhere else, Ancestral is cooked down from agua miel, harvested from Salmiana in Hidalgo, Mexico. It is the grade A Vermont maple to the sticky diner syrup you've been using for your cocktails. Ingredients matter, both in how your cocktail tastes and how you treat the earth. Ancestral is better for both. Is that good?
Sure. Or maybe confusing instead of cheesy. Look, just visit ancestralagave.com to learn more and to order your world-class agave syrup today.
And we'll call that a wrap. Catch you next ad, Greg.
Hasta pronto?
Ancestral Agave Syrup. Available online at ancestralagave.org and wherever Greg and Lou are able to coerce store owners into carrying it.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that sing. It's gonna get you sun in the air.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Sother Teague.
And I'm Greg Benson.
Hey, buddy. How you feeling?
Great. I survived Tales of the Cocktail 2024 by the skin of my fucking teeth. I almost didn't make it, but here I am. You can't keep a good man down, I guess.
I mean, and yeah, when you say this, you're being pretty serious. Like you had some issues.
I am. I'm joking now, but I went with a brief stopover in my apartment. I went from New Orleans to the hospital. Mm-hmm. Turns out that New Orleans is not recommended by the Surgeon General for human consumption. Might have eaten a funky oyster. Probably didn't make it better with all of the rich food and cocktails I put through my body while I was there. But I'm okay now. I'm fine. I'm back. If anyone was alarmed by the hilarious tasting video that I put on Instagram, I apologize. I'm okay. And thank you seriously to everyone who texted and messaged and checked in. It was nice to know that you all were looking out for me. But
well, you and I flew back on the same flight, and you weren't looking or feeling all that top drawer at the airport. Although on the way to the airport, we stopped at Bacchanal and shared a bottle of cider. But you looked a little sweaty. But I thought that was just
green around the gills. I was okay when we got to Bacchanal, I think. I mean, I was exhausted, but that's, again, like par for the course. And honestly, that cider, which wound up being one of the last things I ate and drank for quite some time, was actually like, I mean, it was delightful. I love Basque ciders, and it did actually a pretty good job of, I think, settling my stomach because it was like dry and bubbly. But yeah, by the time I got to the airport, I was not doing so good. And honestly, I feel a little bit vindicated that it wasn't just, me being stupid and having a hangover, that it was an actual near-death experience, and I wasn't being a baby. So I feel good about that. But yeah, after you and I left each other's company, it didn't get any better for a little while.
Yeah, sounds like it only got worse. Well, I have to ask then, certainly this isn't going to turn you off from New Orleans or Tales of the Cocktail, or hopefully even oysters.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay,
no,
good.
I mean, I don't want to turn this into like a life lesson or anything here, but like, as we age, as our corporeal form begins to break down on us just a little bit more every day, it's a reminder, I think, to slow down, and also to kind of like savor those moments of of release, and of being, treating yourself to being a little bit naughty and kind of breaking the rules. Like, speaking of my Instagram presence, I very famously advertised that I started drinking espresso martinis at 6:45 a.m. On my way down there, which is not something that I think you should do every day. This is not a like super size me thing where it's like, it's healthy to eat McDonald's for every single, it's not. Do not do this every day. But if you're on your way to New Orleans and you only do this once a year and your flight's already delayed for who knows how long, like, it's okay to I guess the point I'm making is like, it's okay to like relax and unwind and like be a little bit bad, but also, I think, especially in our industry, when that's kind of our whole vibe, I think it's important to realize that like, this is a treat that you shouldn't do to your body over and over again. And actually, I feel
moderation,
having
moderation in all
inadvertently
things,
cleansed all of
moderation,
New Orleans
right?
out of my system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that goop you had to drink over the course of 48 hours or whatever, I'm sure that pushed everything.
Oh, it was not 48 hours, Sother. It was 6. I had
that whole giant
6
thing
hours.
you had to drink in 6 hours?
4 liters. Yikes. Yeah, exactly. I'll say this. I don't want to get too gross because I know this is a show about eating and drinking, and I don't want to put anybody's appetite off. But prepping for a colonoscopy is fucking medieval. And by that, I mean, it makes you feel like you're dying of dysentery.
Yikes.
It's bad. Anyway.
Yeah, let's see this happen. I'm ready for this one.
Speaking of the exact opposite of that, should we talk about something else? Should we talk about some tasty gin and bring in our guest? How about that? Does that sound like a good palate cleanser for everybody?
Yes.
All right. So with us today in the studio, we're very, very excited to have someone whose gin I'm actually personally a big fan of, Melissa Katrincic from Conniption Gin. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great having you here in the studio. Finally, we had a few false starts, so it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I don't know how to follow, dysentery from colonoscopy prep and oyster, but
how was your week? That wasn't
not at all eventful comparatively. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. It's good to have a complete lack of a private life.
Yeah, Melissa, were you down at Tales of the Cocktail?
Not this year. No. It's for us, we tend to go occasionally, not every year. And I think that's probably good for my liver.
What I was just saying about moderation, you gotta do these things sparingly.
Yeah, and I think once I have big budgets, you guys will see me there more often. But it's a little
for
harder
smaller brands, I understand. You got to go kind of guerrilla. A lot of the smaller brands sort of rent houses, Airbnb houses or what have you, and just set up shop and just invite people to come through and taste and hang out, and that's a lot of fun. But I understand that if you want to get in the game for real, it costs money.
Yep. Couldn't say it better.
Yeah. Well, I was there this year. It was I think I've absolutely lost count, but I'm pretty sure this was either 16 or 17 for me. I I absolutely love it. I go every year. I used to live there, so like it's a reunion for me to go and see old friends as well as new friends and continue the work and do networking and things like that. So, we'll have to look for you there next year. So hopefully you get down there again. But
Yeah, hopefully.
let's get into
Yes,
it and let's talk
exactly.
about your gin, Conniption gin. Let's hear some origin story of this hero.
Oh, well, it all starts with my grandfather.
Okay, that's
Okay.
a great place to start.
There's got to be some familial connection to gin. So my grandparents, when I would stay over at their house, and my sister and my parents would have date night, we'd head over there, and he would, they were the cocktail generation. So one of the biggest things that I recall was that they would have their chore list for the day. Say this was a Saturday, for instance, and he'd have all of these things that he was knocking off of the list. And as soon as he felt like he had achieved what he wanted for the day, he'd clean himself up, and it would invariably be around 4:30, 5 o'clock. And he would head into the dining room. And they had the whole cabinet of spirits. They had, what you would kind of think about in terms of that Mad Men era. And he'd call into the kitchen, he'd call into my grandmother, Gertrude, and he'd ask her, "Are you ready for your cocktail?" And I love watching this tradition. He would take out everything from the cabinet. He'd go and he'd hand crack ice. He would shake. He would get everything ready to go. And his was always in the winter and even parts of the summer, it was a martini. And it was always a gin martini. And so there would be Gordon's. I specifically remember Gordon's. And if
Love
he
Gordon's.
was
I'm a big
fancy, there
fan.
might be there might be some Tanqueray. But my grandmother was a Scotch drinker. I never got into Scotch. I mean, this was like Dewar's. That was not something I was interested in, but I was always interested in the olives. So he'd put extra olives in his martinis when I was staying over there. And he started, I think when I was 3, you guys, he'd start to let me sneak the olives out of his martinis. And ever since, I've always been a gin fan, always, that sense of nostalgia for me, but
Sure.
also this sense of the pause at the end of your day when you're ready to have this break between work and being together and having social connection with your family or your friends. That's what got me into gin. And the origin story of Conniption is I was facing a layoff. So my background's corporate advertising agencies. Lee, my husband and partner in the business, he's a chemist. So you get a marketer who's facing a layoff, right? Exactly. And gin was already a hobby. So this is back in 2013. We had already for a couple of years been traveling, tasting new gins, seeing what was available. Of course, trying out gin cocktails whenever we would see them on the menu. So it was just this passion that was on the side. It was never perceived to be something that we were going to be in industry. And I looked over at him after we were coming home from a trip to Savannah, Georgia. It was our anniversary weekend trip. And I said to him, "Why don't we make gin?" He started to flat out laugh at me. He thought I was nuts. And I was like, "No, seriously, I think we could do this. I think this is something that we could do together." Never in a million years, you guys, thinking this would be something that we take outside of our home state of North Carolina. When you start a distillery, and especially in 2013, 2014, you don't have national aspirations necessarily. It was about following your passion and bringing something new to the market that you could really get behind and you felt passionate about. So Conniption, its origin started after that, and it took us about 1.5 years to get the distillery up and running. It's Durham Distillery in Durham, North Carolina.
Love Durham.
And we
I lived
launched
there.
Conniption. Yeah, I know you're well connected to the area. And we went ahead and we launched the gins in August of 2015. So all from those olives.
Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that what you described to me sounds like, the civilized cocktail hour, right? Which I think that I don't know, have we drifted away from it? Or I can't tell exactly where it went. I work in bars and restaurants all the time, and I feel like less and less people make their reservation for whatever, 7 o'clock, but show up at 6:30 so that they can have a cocktail at the bar prior, or I think less and less people do this ritualistic thing that you just described that your grandparents did of having their evening cocktail kind of at the same hour-ish each night. I find there's something both ritualistic and civilized about that, in my opinion, but that nostalgia.
And I feel like, yes, nostalgia and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you like the early development of your palate for, rare to see a 3-year-old enjoying, gin-soaked olives.
Olives in general, too. That's also
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. But I wouldn't take the olives out of the jar. No, they had to be that they were already in the martini and
Right. They had to go for a swim
sufficiently
first.
soaked. Yes, that's right.
The extra olives I always, refer to as soup and salad, right? So it's a drink and a snack.
I love that you just said that. So do you see behind me? I know everybody can't see this on of course, on a podcast.
Well, you can if you become a regular on our Patreon.
Oh, that's
right.
Fair. So that there is a old vintage style art poster back there that is about salad, and it is in the martinis with olives in there. And Lee found this for me a couple of years ago. I'm going to take a picture and send it to you after this so you
Awesome.
can see.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Mm-hmm. And then Audrey Hepburn, of course, balancing
With
a martini.
Balancing, yeah, I can see that one pretty clear. So you get this thing launched in 2015. Now there's a whole lot more that goes into just like deciding that you want to make a gin, formulating that gin, and then launching that gin. What were the hurdles or pitfalls that you faced as someone not in the industry, kind of breaking into it? And not only breaking into it, you didn't just open up a bar. You decided, I'm going to create a brand. I mean, you have some advertising in your pocket, so I'm sure that was helpful. But like, how did you make that initial transition from I'm a gin enthusiast, we're going to actually formulate a gin, and now we're going to put it to market?
Right. It's a lot of steps in the process for sure. I think for us, the two of us putting our heads together, we broke it down into those iterative steps. What did we need to do to feel that we were educated enough on the category, educated enough on distilling, not only the technical processes of distilling, but also running a distillery, right? So the business side of the house. We signed up for a course at Koval in September of 2013. That was kind of our go, no go, at least on the business side of it. And then in terms of setting the stage for how to create the gins, we spent a good year training our palate. So we sourced gins from all over. We definitely tried upwards of 150 to 200 gins, narrowing down what we liked, what we didn't like. Then at the same time, we had a test still, and we had all of the individual botanicals distilled at a specific concentration level so that we got to know our botanicals. We got to know how they were on the palate, how they were in the heat process. Because remember, a test still is all going to be heat. What we knew we wanted to do that was different is based on bringing modern science into gin distillation. So we are the first in the country to bring in the rotary evaporator. So the cold vacuum distillation, we knew our hypothesis on it. And we had, at the time, Sacred Gin out of London, that is a solely cold distilled gin that has everything from what needs heat sources. Sorry, you guys.
Try to turn your lights back on.
I know. What needs the heat to release its maximum flavor, and what we knew we wanted to focus in on the cold vacuum. But so it was formula development that you could only go so far. And until the stills were in place, and the stills were installed in actually it was July of 2015. We spent, and it was just the first two gins. It was the Conniption American Dry and the Conniption Navy Strength. Very different flavor profiles, different approaches, different demographics, targets out of both of those gins. It was how do you make sure that what you've put together off of a test still and hand blend can then scale up? And that's where I have to say, having a chemist who's the distiller, it was, I think, 2 tries on the main stills for Conniption American Dry to dial in. And it was only the first run on the Navy Strength, and we knew we had it.
Wow.
Right, because I'm sure this guy's being quite meticulous. Now, did you reach out to anyone, a known distiller of gin, a maker of gin? Did you reach out to them to kind of like at least get some advice or partner in with them? Or did you just say like, fuck it, we're going all this on our own?
No. One of the things that we were able to do too while we were in development was attend some of the conventions. So we went to American Craft Spirits wasn't really in develop. I mean, it was just starting. So their first year was our first year in business. So that's predating that was American Distilling Institute. So we had gone to a couple of those conventions and gotten to know David Smith. So David Smith being out of the UK running, you guys, I mean, he's basically the gin judge person of the entire gin industry. So we got to know David really well. And as part of that, I also got to know Anne Brock. So this is previous to Anne being over at Bombay. So she was at Jensen's Gin in London. And, you know, we started to get to know other people in the industry. It was hard to get to know ones that were only going to focus in on gin in the United States, because gin was seen as an auxiliary product with most of the distilleries opening at the time. And for us, it was our focus product. We wanted to be a gin distillery. So I would say we got more advice from the UK gin distillers and the UK gin industry than we did from stateside.
That's interesting. So you say that, you think that gin is an auxiliary or a mid-step in American distilling? Is that what you mean by that?
I meant more so that at the time in 2013, 2014, when all of the craft distilleries, when you started to see the boom, most of them were focused in on getting into whiskey. And so they had to have the white spirits for revenue generation, and vodka and gin were not seen as their main focus.
Gotcha.
Versus us, we're all in on gin.
Got it. You decided we're making. I mean, I'm in the same boat. My plan for the future, I've secured a location, a farm in just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, where we're going to build a distillery, and we want to make whiskey, but we're going to make gin to start. Right? I get it. I see what you mean.
Yeah, in the North Carolina ABC is the other thing that I'm glad we were naive. Really, there's been a lot of things I'm glad we were naive
turned
about.
You off, maybe, right?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, especially in 2014, 2015. I mean, we opened the tasting room October 1st, 2015, the very first day that we could sell a bottle to the general public. And that was one bottle per person per 12-month rolling period.
Wow.
Wait.
That was the only access we had. Yes. One bottle
per person per 12 months?
Per 12 months. Yes.
What?
Is this, it sounds like you're speaking about this in the past tense, like this is something that's changed.
It has dramatically changed. So I was on the board of the Distilling Association of North Carolina at the time. We were doing lots of lobbying. Of course, over the years, we've gotten better at the lobbying and gotten better at expanding and what we like to say, trying to, in certain ways, modernize the ABC system. We're never, I think, going to have a non-control state here, you guys, but we're trying to get access. And it has been a game changer each. So you'd have 2015 as the first bottle. 2017 is when we could sell then 5 bottles per person per 12 months. You'd think that actually helped. And then 2019 is really when things got going. So that's when distilleries were allowed to not only have a tasting room, but open a cocktail bar, serve cocktails. And then we do have daily limits of what someone can purchase. But it's not, I mean, no one's ever coming into a distillery in North Carolina and wanting to buy a pallet of gin anyway.
Right.
I was going to say, daily limits, actually, I feel like I can get behind that. That feels like sensible legislation.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that's wild. And you're not the first person I've heard this from, where when you're kind of like, you know, the first person out of the trenches and you're coming up against all of these laws, that like a huge amount of your time and your starting budget for this business goes into lobbying, which it sounds like that was something that took you a little bit by surprise.
It did. And again, thankfully we were naive to it, because once you're in it, you're in. I mean, as you guys well know, once you're in industry and once you make the decision to be a distiller and be a brand, you can't dip a toe in. You got to go all in. And
in for a penny, in for a pound.
That's right. And I'm glad that we did. And I'm glad that we have seen such a growth. And North Carolina, I mean, yeah, it's got its challenges, but I have to say, I think, you know, we're the best-selling craft gin now in the state. And because there has been almost a lack of access by the larger brands to come in, that has helped us too. I mean, I'm not naive to that either. So it's an interesting journey. I mean, we're 11 years in.
Yeah. Which is, when you create something like this, 11 years in, that's nothing. You're at the beginning of the beginning.
Yeah. At some point we'll be an overnight success.
Hopefully, right. This is hopefully a product that's going to be around for literally into the hundreds of years, we hope, right?
I hope so, yes.
So this is the beginning of the beginning. You haven't even begun to begin. Well, I thank you for all that good work you're doing with lobbying, because, again, I'm going to hopefully open a distillery in the next 8 to 10 years in the same state. So.
Yeah. Beautiful region of this state.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm very fortunate to have this coming my way in the future. In my notes here, it says you want to talk to us about, and I'm curious to know what brought you to the place to name your gin Conniption.
Yeah, that's the grandmother. So that's the Scotch drinker. So she would tell me not to have a conniption. So that was the through line from her was I would, of course, be a pain in her ass. I'm not discounting that I was a challenging child. But that was her thing it was just that kind of old school language that they had, the slang of conniption. When we were going through and trying to figure out a name for our gins, at first we thought we were going to name them different based on the SKU. I'm really glad we did not do that we decided on a brand family. And then we had a short list, and I'm not sure if you guys have had this conversation previously with other guests about how the U.S. trademark office that spirits share with wine, right? Okay. Yeah. So again, thankfully had no idea what I was getting myself into when I tried to figure out the right name to trademark. We had a short list of about 12. Conniption had always been on it. I wasn't aware of why that there was going to be this connection until my mother reminded me. So I told her, I was like, I keep going back to Conniption. I keep thinking that that's the right name for this gin. And she's like, Melissa, of course it is. It's your grandmother. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was this beautiful serendipitous moment of coming full circle. So the gins are Conniption, and we named the main still from Germany Gertrude.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After grandma.
Yes. After grandma.
Oh, that's delightful. Yeah. Just, I feel like that's a word that gets I'm from the Deep South myself, and I feel like that's a word that does get tossed around pretty liberally by maybe my elders. But just to remind maybe the listener what a conniption is, it's a fit. It's you're having a meltdown. You're having like a tantrum or
yes,
like
yeah. I was attached a lot to women in their hysterics. We like to say, of
don't
course,
have a conniption.
Right.
I can hear it from my elders now. Right? Don't have a conniption.
We've switched it around.
I'm having a conniption.
You can have a conniption. It's on the back of the American Dry bottle. Says, "Go ahead, have a conniption." It's kind of our tagline now for sure. And
don't be afraid. Go ahead, have a conniption. Yep. Yeah, I like it. Handsome bottle, by the way. Too bad Damon's not here. He loves to talk about design.
Thank you.
I like it because I think it's, and maybe Jen would, or maybe Greg would follow along with me. Jen would follow along with me. I like it because it's somewhat monochromatic. Greg and I are both colorblind. But it feels nice, and I love that it's a square bottle. I think that square bottle gins have like a special place, right? Many gins that came from the UK had to be brought over on boats, so they started putting them in a square bottle so they didn't roll around so much in the boats.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and it was a nod to the past, and then as you can see on the packaging design, it's kind of that modernization of Art Deco as well, and it all has that back to modernizing gin for the American consumer. And reintroducing so that they fall in love with it again.
Well,
yeah, and I mean the one I also kind of love the nod to the chemistry that's in there, because you have some sort of like little molecular structures going on in the background, and I'd love to talk about the design of the stuff that's actually inside the bottle, because the one thing that struck me when I first tried it was how just very bright and citrusy it was, but it didn't sacrifice on sharpness.
Yes.
And I sort of wonder, you're talking about kind of modernizing it. And I guess I would love to hear what modernizing gin for the American consumer means to you, and how you sort of settled on this particular flavor profile that you were going to go for.
That's a great question. So when we tried all of those gins, we tried, of course, London Dries to what were the contemporaries. And at the time we called them all New Westerns, right? And thankfully, I think we're more into contemporaries as the name of that category. It really came down to what was the level of the more traditional gin botanicals. So juniper to coriander to cardamom, where were they kind of in the gin wheel, and how were they being balanced across savory to sweet to floral to citrus? And a lot of the contemporary gins that we were trying at the time leaned very far in to one of those pillars. So they would go all in on the citrus note, but not be necessarily still balanced in so that it could have maximum approachability in cocktails. Vice versa onto floral, right? So for us, the American Dry was looking at the gin wheel and being about how could we have complexity and balance so that it has a story to tell as first on the palate and then as it is elongated into the finish. So that was really, how do we build something from scratch when we take a look at even choosing cardamom seeds versus cardamom pods? Then the angelica root. We don't have angelica root in its full root form. We have the cut and shredded version, right? So what does that bring to the party? What does the orange in American Dry, just orange peel in the vapor process, in the heat process versus the vacuum? How does that change over time? And then you have the layers of flavor from the cold distilled vodkas, right? So those are really specific into the flavors that we know would otherwise be destroyed by heat, or with the big guys using extracts. We wanted to do everything really authentically. And without any glycerin, no added sugar, everything has to be really preserved into high quality when we make our gins. And so Conniption American Dry has the fresh cucumbers, of course, peeled. The ends are taken off, right? So how do you make sure that you're maximizing really the fresh components, not the bitter? I don't know if you guys have tried just the cold distilled vodka on its own. It's only in North Carolina, but it showcases what the cold distilled does. And it's spa water with a kick. There's just this, it's almost like you've bitten into a fresh cucumber. There's just, it's on the nose, it's in the, you know, as you taste it. And so when I think about modernizing gin, I think about, okay, where were we in terms of London Dries? How have London Dries kind of been the go-tos, but then switching over to what was happening in Old Tom? And then where is the contemporary? Where was it going in 2013, 2014? And it's a much different trajectory in 2024, which is exciting. But at the time, how do you put it all together so that it's a gin that people can sip, as well as they understand that it has so much more offering than a traditional London Dry in the cocktail? And vice versa for the Navy strength. I mean, I think, you know, Greg, you and I talked very quickly before we started. The Navy strength has a journey on the palate that is not at all American Dries. It's all about this big, bold, savory note of how do you have the heat of 114 proof 57 without overpowering the palate into alcohol. And that's about the botanical complexity that we bring to the party in Navy strength. So the caraway on the warm rye bread notes. You know, you've got adjacent on rosemary, and then the lemon, right? That nod to the citrus, but doesn't overpower. It stays bright. And then finally, you've got the figs. So the dried mission figs that we source, and then we cold distill those. The process of thinking about distilling figs, right? You're like, why? But there were global recipe influences. So we looked at, you know, especially South Pacific into Asian cuisines. And you think about figs as bringing this almost luxurious sense of a mouthfeel to it. It doesn't overpower into sweet, but there's something that it does. And that's exactly the same thing for the Navy strength. It does not come across when you try it, right? It doesn't seem like 114. It really just, right.
No, it doesn't. It has heft,
Sure.
It has body for sure, but it has a refreshing
Mhm.
quality to it that I was surprised by, that you don't see in a lot of stuff that's 114
exactly.
proof.
Yeah. I geek out
Well,
on
now I
gin.
gotta
I
open
don't know
this
if you
one.
can tell that.
No,
Well, I should hope
you
so.
come on the right
Yes.
podcast.
I should hope you do.
Thank you.
I would love to, as we're talking about flavors, and we're talking about the American flavor profile. I would love to know how you approach the key ingredient in gin, which is juniper, because a lot of the people that I know that say they don't like gin, will all point to the Christmas tree
Right.
flavor that it has as the reason they don't like it. So as you're sort of trying to, modernize this spirit, pay homage to a lot of the very traditional ways of making this, and a lot of traditional, ingredients, botanicals, even foods that go into these things. How do you square the fact that there are some people out there that are just kind of squeamish about that ingredient? Is this the sort of thing where you're like, well, you can't please everybody, or is there kind of a line that you're trying
There's
to
a
walk
line
there?
we're trying to walk, right? Because I think if we were to downplay juniper so dramatically, I would feel that we're not honoring the tradition, and we're not going to convert people back into gin. They're just going to stay in this flavored vodka world. And juniper, yes, it can be very astringent, but it's all about what are the adjacent botanicals that either play up the astringency or help to soften it. And that's what we've worked hard on. It's like, how do you soften it where it's still very much a part of the gin flavor and what you're going to get on the palate, but it's not going to be screaming at you. But then if you take a look too, so we have the two evergreen of the American Dry and the Navy Strength that were the 2015 releases. And then the Kinship is my gin. So it's my botanical recipe that went into the 2022 release of that style. So I think about each of these gins casting a different target net. So American Dry is the one that will hold your hand from vodka back into gin. It's not going to be intimidating, but it's very much going to be like an eyebrow raiser. And that has been so refreshing to see that that's worked, right? Because of course, go back in time in 2015, right? They came in the door. I could not even have a mixer on the bar. They had to try our gin straight, and they had to try it warm. Right. Well, not even ice. No. So again, North Carolina, I mean, in the end of the day, I think that helped people fall in love with Conniption right out of the gate. But we had to work really hard at all of those that just were like, oh, I don't want to try gin. I've had a bad gin experience, which we make fun of it now in the tour. If you take a tour at our distillery, we will ask that question before we get into it. So how many of you have had a bad gin experience? And I mean, it's invariably at least 3 to 5 hands will go up. That's what they remember.
Sure. I feel like, and I blame this kind of on the fact that, as Americans, we're not allowed to drink before 21. And yet I've heard tell that some people find ways to skirt that. But when you do that, you're not trying the best of the best.
Right.
Unless you were fortunate enough to get the freshly bathed olives as a kid, you're kind of starting out with the absolute cheap stuff. And I think I find the same thing with tequila too. I think a lot of people I think generally like whiskey when they're younger, because bad whiskey can really only get so bad. And then you've got kind of like cheap rum and cheap vodka can be a little bit middling. And then down in like sub-basement 4 is like how bad gin and bad tequila can sink to. So it sounds like you kind of have an uphill battle. Kudos to those people who had a bad experience and still came to the gin distillery. But like, how do you provide gin therapy?
That's
to
a great way
to
to say it. Gin therapy.
Get them to trust again.
It really is about having them feel confident that it's not going to be either the same gin that they had the bad experience off of, that lower quality, or heaven forbid if they took shots off of it. Right, because they don't know cocktails. Or I did not know cocktails. Anyway, I did not steal out of my liquor cabinet, Mom and Dad. I did not do that. But no.
No, of course not.
Yeah, you had your grandparents' cabinet.
That's right. Touche. But then you have it where you also have the conversation that your palate at 17, 18, 19, 20 is not the same palate you have in your later 20s into your 30s. Our palates progress. Our ability to taste different flavors are very different. And
No, I agree 100% because this is just truth. I'm agreeing with the truth. But I think there's also a subtle truth in there that's, as an American anyway, as Greg pointed out, we aren't allowed to drink until we're 21. So of course, prohibit something, make it desirable. So then people seek it out in whatever ways they can get it, which isn't necessarily the best. But also in America, I think we're sort of like led to believe in our younger years that drinking is for a result. And the result, of course, is inebriation or drunkenness or, euphoria. So I think that, younger people aren't doing it for flavor in any regard. That's why they're drinking, where I grew up, it was called Purple Jesus, it was just basically lots of Kool-Aid and Everclear. And, you drink 2 of these and you see God. So I think that we, not only does our palate change over time, our desire to reach that goal changes as well, right? We're not just looking to get slammed, wasted, whatever. We're looking to enjoy a convivial time among friends and have conversation. So like those 2 things are both at play with the early drinking.
Yes. Yes, very well put.
And I just think that gin is polarizing in general.
Yeah.
I love gin.
Yeah, and it's, you probably have an experience that opened your eyes to the versatility of it a lot earlier than others. So that's part of what Conniption's trying to do is there's versatility and approachability in gin. It's not all London Dry. It's not all licking a pine tree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I want to talk about something new that you've got coming down the pipeline. Speaking of different styles of gin that are out there, one of my favorite subcategories of any spirit is barrel-aged gin, and you've got one of those that is coming up for release.
Yes, it'll be
right?
So it's always our seasonal release. So it'll be out here in October. But that is our gin that Lee really runs. That whereas Kinship was mine, barrel-aged is Lee's, and it for him was taking what he'd learned over the years too of the savory notes of gin, playing up more so of those, and then leveraging a barrel that would still allow for our gin to remain a gin, right? We're not trying to turn it into a whiskey. No gin skis in our portfolio, but having it where it provides a lot more of a backbone and this toasted caramel vanilla that's just unexpected in a gin. So it's not an Old Tom. We didn't sweeten it. It goes into High West bourbon barrels that have been recently dumped. And we've got twice the amount of in barrels right now. So this is going to be really exciting. We sold through the release last year in only 4 months. Yeah. And then, so this year we're going to see, I mean, we have people who get ready to come into the distillery and buy these bottles, which is really exciting.
And buy their 5 bottles. If
no, they can buy as many as they want now. Well, not as many, right? There is that daily limit. But yeah. And thankfully we have D2C.
With my tanker truck.
We finally have our D2C online purchases available too. I mean, I'm sure you guys know that's something in playing with the 3-tier system. You got to do it right, but it was finally up and running for us, which is great. So yeah, so the barrel aged, we're going to have to get you guys that as soon as I can.
Yeah, I'd love to try it. I just cracked open both these bottles as we've been on the air, the American Dry and the Navy Strength, and they're radically different. And I'm glad to see that and to say that, it's not just about one having a higher proof. They're different flavor profiles for sure. One is kind of almost juicy with so much citrus, and the other one is, as you mentioned earlier, a little bit more savory and certainly much sharper at that higher proof point. I'm one that's typically pretty slow to offer opinions about. I sit on tasting panels for NOLA Spirits and LA Spirits, and I've been asked to do San Francisco Spirits next year. So, and I'm notoriously the slow one with my notes. Right, it takes me. I have to revisit and revisit and revisit. But on initial visit here, I'm excited to revisit. So I'll say that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And at some point, you're going to have to crack open the Kinship. I can see behind you.
Yeah, it's right behind me as well. I'll get there.
Yeah, and
let's talk about that a little bit then. So Kinship is a whole nother one, a whole nother mark under the Conniption, and it's finished with butterfly pea flower, which gives it a blue purple hue. Let's talk about that and why you decided to make it.
Yep.
And what do those extra botanicals bring to the party?
Yes. So we got to back up to 2021. I was thinking about doing the third evergreen SKU anyway. Had no inclination that it was going to be butterfly pea flower. This was really just about me also being a gin judge, pulling in now from my palate what I liked. What I also thought that the cold distillation could do even more so, right? So Kinship has the most cold distillation of any of our products. And then it was, you got to look at 2019 when the competitor, right? And I can say it on air. So when Empress 1908 came into the market, it allowed for a bit more excitement than we even anticipated back into the gin category. And I'm not going to argue whether or not it's a good gin. I'm not doing that. But I'm also going to say it created a buzz. It created people.
It put eyes on the
category. Exactly. And 2020 happened. 2020, butterfly pea flower was on the list for the FDA to review to get into the generally regarded as safe, into the GRAS list. It did not make it there, 2019, 2020. It got on the GRAS list at the end of 2021. And seeing what was going on, as well as knowing that, hey, we know how to put together a really amazing gin, that yes, it can be beautiful, but it also has a lot of cocktail applicability. We want to cast that wide net. I want to go after, especially Kinship, it's 70-30 women. Navy is 70-30 men, and American Dry is 50-50. But if I think about getting women who just go after their vodka tonics or their vodka sodas and getting them to explore flavor, I think I can do it with the addition of the butterfly pea flower. And as you guys know, butterfly pea flower doesn't do anything on the palate. It is really only there for the color.
Right, which is I was going to bring that up, especially again sitting here with Greg and I, who are both colorblind. Like, when I was a chef and an instructor at the New England Culinary Institute, I would have students bring me their dish and say, I have this beautiful stuffed sole with a, beurre blanc, and I put some finely diced red bell peppers on top for color. And I would say, like, I don't give a shit about the color. Does it taste good? Does it go with this dish?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I understand that that's appealing, of course. Mm-hmm. And if that's something you can lean in on, that will, again, put eyes on and lips on the product, then you can then get them over the fence and maybe come to the American Dry.
That's right. It is all about where's the gateway into the portfolio. What is going to get you to explore gin and feel comfortable about exploring gin and exploring flavor? And Kinship, I've had with serious industry people, like, don't you feel like you chased a trend line? And I'm yes, of course I did.
Sometimes that's accessible, or that's what makes it accessible. That's right.
And I challenge anyone who is in love with gin as much as me, close your eyes then. Close your eyes when you try it. Don't make an assumption on the fact that you have something that has color in front of you. And then tell me, do you still think it's a serious gin? And then they're like, oh.
So let's talk about some of the flavor notes that are in there that differentiate it from the other two.
That's great. Yes. So one of the contemporary gins that I have always loved is Martin's Miller Westbourne. Now, Westbourne is a different, flavor profile than its standard. And there were a couple of things that I really called out. It was the licorice root. and also the bitter orange. And so for me, it was taking a look again at the vapor process. What could I do in terms of percentages that could shift us a little bit more to approachability, still have juniper coming out. It has more juniper than American Dry. But the heat process for the licorice root, the bitter orange together, along with, again, that angelica root in there, which is still from the American Dry, and then the juniper, Indian coriander, cardamom. Those are the three that are always in our gins, is those three botanicals. Started building it from there. And then I thought about, okay, we haven't had cold distilled citrus in anything. And for you guys, cold distilled citrus is just so gorgeous on the nose, as well as like, it's not bringing the same level of brightness. It actually has a lot more of body to it. And so I looked at fresh orange peel and fresh lemon peel on their own, cold distilled. And it's such a party. It really is. So when you talk about a juicy gin, that was my goal with Kinship. So it has the most, like I said, the most cold distilled. It's going to have the cucumber, again, for the freshness, but it's not going to come across as cucumber on the palate. And then you've got the honeysuckle flower, and then we have the fresh orange and the fresh lemon.
All right.
Sits all together, marries itself. We proof it down. We do not add the butterfly pea flowers until the very end. And they sit, macerate in the gin for about 24 hours. And then it gets cycled through the batch to ensure distribution of color, a really deep, lovely indigo hue. And then it gets bottled.
All right. Well, you convinced me. I'm cracking it open right now.
Oh,
I mean, my bottle is gone. I will admit, because, well, and the reason it's gone is because I brought it to a barbecue in early June because I loved all those citrus notes that were on it. I was like, this is going to be great. I had a little punch recipe I was going to do with it, but bringing gin to a barbecue, especially with like 24 people, is it's a risky move. Like in fact, I knew for a fact that there were people there who are self-described as not liking gin, but they did like it. They're like, yeah, they're like, I'm not sold on gin as a whole, but like they gravitated toward the citrus. They liked the sort of punch that I built around it. But I think the reason they were open to trying it is because it's really, really purple. And I think that is, it's eye-catching and it's intriguing, and it sets people up to kind of be like, this is an experience that you have not had before, which I think is vital, especially when you're out there trying to change minds.
Yeah. It does have a lot more citrus fruit forwardness, kind of I'm not getting it straight away off the nose, but on the palate for sure. And again, it just looks dark to me. So it does play little tricks on the mind, just the color. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't fight against those things. I think you're a fool if you're going to fight the flow of the stream. If this is a thing that's going to put eyes on not only your own product, but on the category at large, a high tide raises all boats, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And, if you're going to enter the market with something like this to draw those people over, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. Because I also think, if we're going to talk about the American drinker, which we talk about constantly on this show, I don't think any American would tell you, I only eat whatever, grilled cheese sandwich with the crust cut off and French fries. I don't care if it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I don't care if it's 110 degrees out or 10 degrees. I don't care if it's Christmas, New Year's, my birthday, my dog's birthday, whatever. I drink that. This is what I eat. Yet there are plenty of Americans out there who have a thing that they drink, whether it's 10 degrees or 110 degrees or all those things I just said. And it's hard to get them to jump off of that, and especially when they've decided, like, this is the thing that works. I feel confident when I order it. I feel good when I drink it. It's doing the quote unquote job of getting me, relaxed and buzzed or whatever, making me a little bit more of a social person. So like I drink vodka soda. That's just what I drink. So I get that it's hard to get people to jump. And if this is something that would lure their attention and get them to jump, then go for it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm not empowering you to do a thing you've already done. I'm just saying I agree with you doing it. And I know that
we're
my
saying you
opinion
did a
has no
good
bearing on
job.
your decision. You have my approval to do this, the thing you've already done.
But it's also
You're welcome.
important, we don't want to lose our passion for the gin category. So
Sure.
we did watch the explosion of pink gin and bottom out of pink gin in the UK, and that was not anything that ever appealed to us. We're like, we're not going to add saccharine, sweet, fruity flavor profiles into our gin. That's just not.
Oh yeah, did you see the Beefeater drop from a couple of years ago? Strawberry gin.
Yes, exactly.
What?
I'm like,
It wasn't good.
I don't think Desmond Payne was the one behind that.
think
I gotta be honest.
it.
I know.
My intrigue was not because I thought it was good.
Right.
Well, I think it pissed a lot of people off because people saw it, and of course it's red, pink, whatever, and they thought, "Oh, pink gin," and they bought it without seeing the word strawberry on the label.
And they're like, "What am I going to do with this once I try it?" Yeah,
I think it was slightly a fiasco.
So it's exciting to see. I don't know. I'm hopeful you guys, and I'd love to pick your brain about that offline about what you saw at Tales in terms of the category. I mean, of course, we have Simon Ford. I'm sure he was present at Tales, and when you think about what Ryan Reynolds has been doing with aviation, I mean, we had high hopes. I'm going to put it out there. I had high hopes that he would start the conversation again about the gin category instead of leaning so far into the personality of Ryan Reynolds. But that didn't happen.
Right.
This is Ryan's gin.
I mean, if you're Deadpool, I don't know. Play the hand you've got, I guess.
Yeah. But it wasn't, again, we weren't ready to have this tipping point in gin that we've been working hard towards in the United States. But I will be really transparent. There's something going on in the last 6 to 12 months. There are conversations that are shifting with the consumers. And it's at events, it's at our cocktail bar, it's when we're out in market, and with our sales team out in market. I think we're getting there. And it really is an exciting time to see that super premium, ultra premium gin, right? So that's your $30 and up on shelf gins. There's exploration. And there's starting to be, it's not just industry behind the category. The consumers are coming back.
Yeah, right on.
No, I agree. I mean, my local, I live in a pretty working class neighborhood, and my local liquor store is starting to carry some of like the fancier stuff, even like the very like working class, like, Irish, Italian, bros who work the counter. One of them the other day was telling me, he's like, "Hey, have you tried this gunpowder gin? It's from Ireland. It's good." And it's like, 5 years ago, I would have never imagined that like I would be having this conversation with a dude who had a We the People forearm tattoo. But that's just where we are. People are, like you said, it's trickling down into the consumer. And I think that's cool. I'm also wondering, given that, do you have any news that you want to break here? Anything that you're working on? Any sort of like stuff you have in the lab that you're tinkering with?
I wish I had something that was ready for prime time. The barrel aged is what I've got in the pipeline right now. But we keep thinking about, okay, so Conniption is 10 years old next year. What could we do? Right. And so is it Lee and I think if I bring one more product for Lee to make right now, I might get divorced. So I have to balance this a little bit. But yeah.
I want to.
No, that's it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to stay married.
Yeah. You gotta stay married. Well, I mean, I'm excited for the category in general. I had a gin bar for a while called Gin Palace. I think we were a little too early. But there are other great bars in the world. When I was in San Sebastian, I was charmed by a bar called Gin Tonneria that boasted 138 gins and 138 different gin tonics, each designed exactly for the gins on the back bar. I recommend you go there if you get a chance. You, and also you, the listener. pretty fascinating to watch these guys do their thing and to taste all these different gins and to see how people are really behind them and just all the subtleties that this category can bring, like it's a fun category to explore. And I love that it's being made more and more and in more places, I love seeing
and
gin
high
all over the
quality
place.
gins, right? I think that's
Yeah. Well, I think that, argumentatively, we've kind of gotten past that in a lot of ways, right? We've been distilling for long enough to understand great distilling. And I think since the 50s, we've been really good at like filtering. And so nothing's garbage anymore. If it makes it to the market, it's probably quality. Is it to your taste is the next thing, right? And then you get things like you coming in and doing rotary evaporation and cold distilling and adding those things in after the fact as sort of almost flavor agents and, really tinkering with the molecular structures. Those are the advancements that we're going to start seeing in every category, I think, right? We're good at distilling and filtering. Now we got to get better at like the recipe, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
I think, I look at it like from 3,000 feet up, I guess, or whatever it is, 30,000 feet, however high I can go. Well, this has been fascinating, and I'm really intrigued by these gins, and I'll give them more attention. I do drink a lot of gin tonics at home. That's kind of my home drink when I'm just around the house. So I'll employ these in that way to get to know them better, and I'll get to the bottom of these bottles. I guarantee that.
Thank you.
And I'll even
and then we'll have the barrel aged your way.
This purple one. But let's talk about the name real fast.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the name real fast. Kinship. So Conniption kinship. Why is it kinship?
Yeah. So when you look at what we focused in on with modernizing gin, we just thought about the tradition and the modern and how they come together, but they work together collaboratively. There's a kinship about it. And there is also for us this, it was never a Conniption being a fit. It was a fit of inspiration. So this, how do we work this all together where you feel like not only the techniques of what we've done, as well as how the botanicals collaborate in the bottle, that there is a real kinship to the whole process. And then you have the lovely pH shift of when you add tonic or citrus and you get your different colors. So you even have like a great chemistry set in front of you when you make a cocktail.
Like those kits your grandfather would buy you for Christmas, and you'd put things together and they would bubble or turn colors.
Yeah, now hopefully no one's making like a volcano out of kinship, but
You never know what those guys at Paradise Lost are up to. Maybe we'll see.
That's right. As long as they pay for it, they can do what they want with it, right? Well, This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking about this. Where can people follow along to see what is going on with Conniption and understand?
Yes, please. So conniptiongin.com is where all things Conniption live. And then we're very active on Instagram, getting more active on Pinterest because that's coming back. Or I guess it's never left, but it's back in the forefront. And always, for your 65s and ups who are on Facebook still, we're there.
Wow, just calling that out.
I'm talking to my father-in-law specifically on that one. I love him, but whoo, yeah, he's a Facebook addict.
Harsh, but not wrong.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks again. I think, yeah, of course. Greg, unless you got something else.
No, I think that's going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. So thank you very much to you, the listener, for tuning in, and tune in next week. It's going to be our last show before we take a little summer break, but we're going to have a representative from Rum Clement on to talk about another one of my favorite spirits out there, rums from the island of Martinique. So stay tuned for that. But for now, that is going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. And till next time, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock.
The Speakeasy is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food and drink radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.